So whenever you're feeling fear about anything, there's some idea of loss connected to that. And so if you're afraid of a person, there's some idea of loss around that person or that situation. You have to know exactly what it is. It's just understanding that fear is the idea that I'm going to lose. That's why when you get to the point, that's like what you said, the ultimate fear, one of the ultimate fears is the fear of death. And so if a person wasn't afraid to die, they would be a lot more honest. So it's the fear of death that's really underneath all fears. And I totally agree with that. Ultimately, it's the fear of death. But the Course says there's one that's even deeper than that. That's beneath, which is the fear of God. That the fear of God is even deeper than the fear of death, which is the same as saying even the fear of love is deeper than the fear of death. But again, this is an interesting thing. It's like I ask for answers, Spirit gives me one, but Spirit doesn't at the least bit believe that you're going to necessarily accept that as true, because if you already accept it as true, you wouldn't be needing an answer. So it's almost like I don't expect people to agree with what I say. I wouldn't even be sitting here if I expected you to agree with what I say. As a matter of fact, it's almost mandatory that a part of you doesn't agree with what I say in order for you to stay the same way you are right now. Because the way you are right now is based on the way you think right now and what you believe is true right now. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's almost like you got to disagree with what I say that doesn't sound like what you already believe. Because that's what new means. I need another perspective. Why? Because the perspective that I already have is the perspective that's producing the experience that I already am having. So, doggone right, I'm going to have to hear something other than what I believe. That's what you call a different perspective. But you don't have to agree with it or believe it or welcome it. The first stage, the Course says, of accepting the truth of anything is just hearing it without necessarily believing it. It just has to be said. So that's what I'm doing in the class. I'm just saying stuff. And here's the next paragraph I'm going to say. It says, I don't foster level confusion, but you must choose the correct level confusion. You wouldn't excuse insane behavior on your part by saying you couldn't help it. Why should you condone insane thinking? You don't condone insane behavior, the Course says, so why are you condoning insane thinking? There's a confusion here that you would do well to look at clearly. You may believe that you're responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. Most people believe that they're responsible for what they do, but they don't believe they're responsible for what they think. He says, because the truth is that you are responsible for what you think. It's like if I learned through my religious upbringing that I was a sinner, which is what I heard, then I don't care about that story anymore. In this moment, I'm responsible for whether or not I still think that. It doesn't matter how I was brought up as a child. In this moment, I'm responsible for whether I still think I'm a sinner or whether I still think I'm guilty. That's why when we take the past, when we take our present moment and we interpret it in terms of the past, then we project that past into the future and we experience it all over again. If I take this moment and go, well, God really doesn't love me and I'm a very sinful person, well, then I'm projecting into the future that experience again. But I could stop right now and go, you know what? I grew up in a world where human beings were teaching me what it was they believed was true based on what they had been taught. And you know what? It may not necessarily have been true. So I think right now, since I'm an adult, I'll choose to believe what I want to believe. And I don't choose to believe I'm sinful and guilty and separate from you all and that you do stuff to me and it's your fault. I don't choose to believe that anymore. I don't care if anybody else believes it. I don't even care when anybody else believes as much as I used to, because it's just their path. It's the way that they've chosen to learn their lessons. But the Course says we identify with what we believe, so when someone says something like, I don't believe what you just said, he says we feel attacked because we identify with our beliefs. And so as soon as someone doesn't agree with us, we usually have an actual emotional reaction to that because we now believe it is us. So when someone says, I just heard what you said, but I don't agree with it, I look at it differently, the tendency is to feel defensive. Because I feel that when people are saying stuff sometimes opposite to what I believe, But what's cool is to understand I am not my beliefs. I'm just identifying with this to the point that I'm getting defensive about it. And it really doesn't make any difference whether the other person believes me or whether I believe them. They're going to walk out the door and go their way, and I'm going to go out the door and go my way. So it really doesn't matter what anybody else is telling you at all, or what you're telling them. It goes both ways. It's just whether or not what you're hearing has any meaning for you. So he's saying that I am acting out what I think. So are you acting out of what you think and believe?
Yes.
Okay. Then it goes on to say what he says the truth is that you're responsible for what you think, because it's at the level of what you think that you can exercise choice. So the only level that a person can truly exercise choice is in what they think. Because it's only at the thinking level that you can exercise choice. He says, so what you do comes from what you think. 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 Now, why am I saying it over and over again? Because the Course says it over and over again, that it's through repetition that you begin to get something. You know, it's like, that's why I love the fact that the Course says the same thing over and over again in so many different ways, because it's really repetition that changes your mind, not getting a lot of new stuff that you've got to try to assimilate. You know what I mean? Like, there's 1,000 different paths you could study, or you could choose a path that really resonates to your soul and say, I'm going to commit myself to that for a certain period of time, and then stay with it until you have some kind of a breakthrough.
Repetition that we get.
It's the repetition is why you're programmed the way you are right now. That's right. So like when you say, Chris, that about God abandoning you, why would God abandon you? What did your ego tell you that you were doing that would make God abandon you? Why would God abandon you, Chris?
Because I wasn't doing my part.
Okay, because you weren't. And what is your part that you're not doing?
That I need to get this and do it right.
Okay, so would you agree then that your description of God was basically a description of a person?
Yeah.
You know, it's people that sometimes appear to abandon us if we don't get it and if we don't do it right. And so what the Course teaches is that we have created a perception of God that isn't true, and then when the true creator within us communicates with us, we say the creator is wrong, which I thought was hilarious. It's like, no, God, I've already decided that you punish and that you get me and that there's sacrifice required and there's something I could do to lose the love of God. So I'm sorry that you're telling me I'm incorrect in that perception because I'm the one that made you up.
Or like I do, I say, oh, that's a nice fairy tale, but this is reality.
Right. And that makes perfect sense because this is what you are experiencing through your physical body. This is what you are experiencing through your physical senses. Now, that's what he was saying when he said earlier about body thoughts being confusing, because what you're feeling in your body is coming from what you think. So if you really want to get a different feeling in your body, you have to have a different thought. Got that? So whatever you're feeling about God, if you were to walk out here today and go, I'm feeling this way because of the way I think, you would have had breakthrough. You would have had a major shift beyond anything you can imagine. And understand this too. It takes a minute to transform your emotions, because an emotion is just it's a meaning that you've given an emotional charge to. You know, a feeling is just a meaning that you've given an emotional charge to because you have made it so valuable and so real to you. So it takes a minute for these new thoughts to filter down and change our emotional responses. And so be patient with yourself when you say you want to make a change. It's going to take a minute for your body to respond to that new thought that you're giving it. That's why when the person is trying to make a change, they should be around people who are trying to make the same change as much as possible. For a little while, almost be snooty. I'm serious. For a little while, I'm not going to hang around certain people right now, doing and saying certain things right now, because right now I need a new way of thinking, and I know I'm fragile and it's brand new, and it takes a minute for me to change. So therefore, I'm going to make it as easy as possible on myself, since what I do comes from what I think, and what I think is creating my experience. Then I'm going to join with other people who are also trying to take more responsibility for their experience and be more loving also, even though they know they haven't got it together completely yet. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. That's the easiest, I'm telling you, that's the easiest way to make a change. And don't go home and try to talk to your friends and relatives that would think what you're doing is crazy. That's another big trick. It's like people walk out of the door and try to explain something that they themselves don't understand. To be honest, they don't really understand what the Course is saying completely, but they'll find themselves trying to tell someone else who will say, are you out of your mind? And what that person is doing is reflecting back to you the part of you that feels like you're out of your mind for doing this. That's why when a person tries to make a big shift, it looks like they get a lot of opposition sometimes from their environment and people around them. Those people are reflecting back to you your own doubts about the new path you've chosen. They are a direct reflection of your own subconscious doubts. So that's why in the beginning, the person who tries to believe that they're innocent and not guilty is always affronted by people who tell them that there is guilt, there is sin, you're bad, you're crazy if you don't believe in this. Because they used to believe that. So whenever you're looking at anybody, the Course says you should say, I see only the past. That I'm looking at what I used to think, what I used to do, what I used to believe. I'm just seeing the past. You look up in the sky at night, you're just seeing the past. That light started out millions of years ago. You're never looking at a star the way it is today when you look up in the sky. That's deep when you really think about it. That when you look out, you're seeing the way it was 1 billion light years ago. Okay, that's true for me to you. It's no different between me to a star and me to you. I'm still seeing the past. I'm seeing you the way you were. Every time I look at you, I'm looking at you the way you were. That's deep. That's deep. And even if it's not true, that's fascinating kind of thinking. That's what I like about it. Whether it's true or not, it's more interesting than most of the stuff I hear people talk about. Yeah, it's like, wow, even if this is dumb, even if this is the craziest stuff in the world, it beats the regular conversation I hear most of the time.
Now, Earl, is it because I'm looking at you the way you were because of my perception?
Exactly, because when you look at me, you're looking at what you learned to think I am and what you learned to believe I am. You see what I'm saying? If you look at me and you say I'm a man, you learn to see me as a man. He says we're always seeing our past learning. That's why I love it even when I'm talking about something and I'm talking with conviction, it's kind of funny to me because I'm still talking about what I learned. And because I'm identifying with it, then I think I am right. And I don't have any doubt about it. And you know why I don't have any doubt about it? Because your perception will always witness to your beliefs. So in your physical world, what you will be saying is true. The person that believes that you can't trust people, they will be true about that because they will draw people to them that they can't trust. And they'll sit up and say, man, you're crazy saying that it can only be loving people in your life. Why? Because their physical reality is reflecting their belief that it can't be that way. But that's not true for me. It's wild. When I was growing up, it wasn't nothing to hear about. It looked like, like somebody especially in the black body, looking like they were going through police brutality through somebody with a white body. That was very common when I was growing up in the South. I didn't experience that ever at all because I always thought that the whole idea of racism was the stupidest thing that I could even imagine. Even when I was a kid, I just went, that's the stupidest thing I could imagine is somebody not liking somebody because of the color of their skin rather than who they were and their character. And you know what I'm saying? Without actually having a relationship. I walk in the door, I got this color skin, so you go, oh, I got you figured out. I know what you about. You a black dude. So I know what you about. And that happens all the time. When I used to watch the news and I would see the way black people were portrayed in the news, I used to go, wow, those parts of the country that there are no black people there, I can imagine those white people have a really freaked out perception of us. I thought it was stupid, so I never ran into that type of behavior toward me. It wasn't in my world because it wasn't in my goal at a personal level. Do you follow what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So always remember when you're getting ready to stand up for what you believe is right, it's right to you based on what you've experienced and what you've learned. It isn't necessarily true for everybody else because it's true for you. Everybody don't have bum relationships. There are people who don't even think about money. There are people who have relationships that are perfect that they're not processing nothing. There are people who go to work every day and they think that they feel guilty almost because it's so much like play. Don't think anything you're going through means everybody's going through that, because they're not. But you're going to hang out with the people like you to do. And then you'll think that's the way it is. And that's the way it is. Like attracts like. Wow. So this last sentence that he says in this paragraph is that, he says, and I love this, he says, what you do comes from what you think. You can't separate yourself from the truth by giving autonomy to behavior. Your behavior is controlled by